Prison food exposed. What inmates really eat behind bars. Picture this. You're sitting in a cold, echoing prison chow hall. Fluorescent lights flicker above you, buzzing like flies. Steel trays slam onto long tables, the clatter echoing like thunder. A guard shouts for silence. The tray in front of you carries your meal. At first glance, it barely looks like food. A slice of bread so hard it bends instead of tears. A gray lump of meat that smells faintly of sour garbage. A scoop of watery beans with tiny black specks floating in it. And a small carton of milk. The expiration date? 2 weeks ago. You're starving. You haven't eaten since dawn, and your stomach growls like a beast. But every instinct in your body screams not to touch what's on the tray. Around you, inmates push food away, gag, or start trading. A piece of bread for a spoonful of beans, a sip of milk for a packet of peanut butter smuggled from commissary. And then it hits you. This is your life now. 3 times a day, every single day for years. Food isn't about choice. It isn't about nutrition. It isn't even about taste. It's about control. This isn't a movie scene. It's not exaggeration. It's the daily reality for more than 2 million people locked inside America's prisons and jails. Behind those walls, meals are stripped down to their cheapest form. Rotten meat, moldy bread, watered-down beans, sometimes even meals crawling with maggots. And this isn't a secret. Reports, lawsuits, and testimonies from ex-inmates have exposed the truth for decades. In Michigan, entire prisons were found infested with maggots in their kitchens. In Florida, bread was so moldy it turned blue. In Texas, inmates were served meat stamped, not fit for human consumption. Yet, the system keeps feeding it, because behind every tray is money, politics, and profit. The shocking truth? Prison food is not designed to keep inmates healthy. It is designed to keep them alive, just barely. Just enough to work, to suffer, and to survive another day. But the real story goes even deeper. Food inside isn't just food. It becomes a weapon, a punishment, a form of currency, a way for gangs to control blocks, a way for companies to pocket millions while prisoners get sick. So tonight we're going inside the chow hall. We're uncovering what's really served, how inmates survive, and how prison food exposes the darkest side of the justice system. Because if food is the most basic human right, what does it mean when even that is taken away? What's on the tray? Every prison day begins the same way. The sound of steel doors slamming open, guards shouting orders, and hundreds of tired bodies shuffling toward the chow hall. For most inmates, the first thought in their head is not about freedom or family or even survival. It's about food. Breakfast is the first meal of the day, and on paper, it's supposed to be balanced. Maybe eggs, cereal, and milk. But inside most prisons, breakfast is a cruel joke. Instead of fluffy scrambled eggs, inmates often get powdered eggs, clumps of yellow mush cooked until rubbery. Instead of fresh cereal, they might be handed a scoop of generic cornflakes, soggy from watered-down milk. And the coffee? It's barely coffee at all. Most inmates describe it as brown-colored water with a bitter taste that lingers like burnt paper. Sometimes breakfast is even worse. 2 slices of stale bread, a small packet of jelly, and a cup of what they call grits. The grits are so watery they look more like soup, and the bread often has green specks of mold if you look closely enough. That's the fuel prisoners are expected to start their day with. Lunch and dinner don't fare much better. A typical prison lunch might include a scoop of plain rice, a spoonful of beans, and something labeled meat. But that meat is usually a processed soy product, pressed into patties or cut into grayish strips that taste like cardboard soaked in salt. Sometimes it's so rubbery you can bounce it on the table. Dinner might bring slightly more variety, maybe pasta, maybe a casserole of leftovers mashed together, but it rarely adds up to enough. The truth is, prisons spend only about $2 to $3 per inmate per day on food. That's less than the price of a single sandwich in the outside world. With such a tiny budget, meals are built to fill stomachs, not to nourish bodies. Fresh fruits and vegetables are rare. Maybe once a week, an apple shows up on the tray, bruised and soft. Maybe twice a month, a scoop of frozen carrots or peas is added. But most of the time, Inmates get starch after starch, meal after meal. Potatoes, rice, bread, pasta. Cheap fillers that leave you feeling bloated but never satisfied. One former inmate described it this way: you eat just enough to quiet your stomach, but an hour later, you're starving again. It's like they feed you to survive, not to live. And for those who think the portions are fair, think again. Trays are often so small that grown men and women leave the chow hall still hungry. A typical tray might carry 1,200 calories, far below the 2,000 to 2,500 a human body actually needs. For inmates forced into prison labor, working in kitchens, laundries, or even chain gangs, the lack of calories becomes punishment in itself. But perhaps the worst part isn't what's on the tray. It's what's not. The dignity of sitting down to a meal, the comfort of variety, the simple joy of flavor, all of that is stripped away. Meals are repetitive, bland, and soul-crushingly boring. Day after day, the same beans, the same bread, the same watered-down coffee. Food in prison doesn't just starve the body. It starves the mind. It wears people down, eroding morale until hunger and hopelessness blur into one. And all of this is intentional. Food is not meant to heal here. It's meant to control. The kitchen hustle. Every prison has a kitchen, and on the surface, it looks like any large cafeteria. Massive steel pots simmer on industrial stoves, trays are stacked in tall piles, and the smell of cooking food drifts through the air. But what actually happens behind those kitchen doors is something most people on the outside could never stomach. Inmates are the ones doing the cooking. They chop onions, stir enormous vats of beans, and scoop rice into trays. For many, landing a kitchen job feels like a small victory. It gets them out of their cells, keeps them moving, and sometimes, if they're lucky, allows them to sneak a little extra food. But once inside, they discover the ugly truth. Prison kitchens run on spoiled ingredients, corner cutting, and corruption. Deliveries arrive in bulk, truckloads of food meant to feed thousands of people. But these shipments are not what you'd find in a grocery store. Boxes of meat arrive slimy and gray, reeking of rot. Vegetables show up already half black with mold. Bread is spotted with green fuzz before it's even unpacked. And still, the guards sign the papers. In the prison system, nothing goes to waste, even if it should. In 2014, Ohio inmates exposed a shocking scandal: maggots in their food. Inspectors discovered larvae wriggling inside a serving line. The same year in Michigan, maggots were found crawling in prison kitchens run by the food contractor Aramark. In Florida, reports surfaced of mold-covered loaves being handed out to hundreds of prisoners. Each time, officials promised it was an isolated incident. But these incidents kept happening again and again. Prisoners working in kitchens described the orders they were given: cook it longer. If meat smelled rancid, boil it until the stink faded. If rice had bugs, stir and serve. If bread had mold, scrape it off and pass it out. For inmates forced to prepare these meals, the sight was enough to kill their appetite completely. One former kitchen worker recalled, "We opened a box of meat and it was green. I told the guard and he said, 'Don't worry, they won't notice once it's cooked.' We had to serve it anyway." But it's not just the spoiled food. Corruption thrives in the prison kitchen. Staff and guards are notorious for stealing the better supplies, eggs, fresh fruit, real cuts of meat, before they ever reach the inmates. In some facilities, the best food never even sees the chow hall. Instead, it ends up in staff meals or disappears into black markets run by corrupt employees. For the inmates, the scraps remain. And yet, even those scraps are fought over. Kitchen workers risk smuggling out small portions: an apple hidden in a uniform, a scoop of peanut butter tucked into a pocket. If caught, the punishment can be brutal: loss of a prison job, a disciplinary write-up, or even solitary confinement. Still, men and women take the risk because hunger is stronger than fear. And then there are the fights. The kitchen is one of the most dangerous places in the prison. Knives and boiling pots become weapons in an instant. Inmates argue over stolen food, over who gets the better jobs, over who controls access to commissary. Guards keep watch, but the kitchen is chaos. Loud, hot, crowded, and tense. For those who work there, the kitchen reveals a dark truth. Food inside prison is not just about feeding people. It's about survival, corruption, and control. The chow hall trays tell one story. The kitchen, hidden from public eyes, tells another, one that is far uglier. The survival hacks. When the food on the tray is barely edible, when hunger gnaws at your stomach day after day, survival forces creativity. Inside prison, entire underground food cultures have developed, turning scraps into meals, commissary snacks into feasts, and desperation into innovation. The king of this culture is ramen. On the outside, a packet of ramen costs less than a quarter. On the inside, it becomes more valuable than gold. Inmates use ramen as money, trading it for favors, gambling with it in card games, or even paying off debts. One former prisoner said, "I saw guys fight harder over ramen noodles than over cigarettes." That's how much it mattered. But ramen isn't just currency. It's the foundation of a whole menu of recipes. Inmates crush noodles and mix them with canned tuna to make a makeshift casserole. They use hot water to soften ramen, then roll it with chips and cheese powder to create burritos. Add tortillas, ketchup, and chopped sausage, and suddenly you have a prison pizza. These creations are called spreads. A spread isn't just food, it's an event. Several inmates come together, pool their commissary items, and cook. One brings ramen. Another adds chips. Someone contributes summer sausage, or maybe a small can of beans. Together, they transform trash into something that feels human. The tools are as inventive as the recipes. With no stoves or ovens, inmates improvise. They strip electrical wires, attach them to metal, and create homemade heating coils. They boil water in buckets, heat tortillas under lamps, and stir soups in garbage bags. The methods are risky, sometimes dangerous, but hunger drives ingenuity. Some spreads become legendary inside. Jailhouse nachos, made from Doritos, cheese sauce, and pickles. Prison tamales, crafted by wrapping meat and noodles in plastic, then cooking them in hot water. Cakes layered with cookies, peanut butter, and melted candy bars. Each meal tells a story of struggle and resilience. Even drinks are reinvented. The most infamous is Pruno, prison wine. Inmates hide fruit, sugar, and bread inside a plastic bag or bottle, let it ferment in the heat, and drink the foul-smelling liquid weeks later. It tastes like rotten fruit, and it can make people violently sick. But for birthdays, holidays, or moments of escape, it's cherished. Food hacks are not just about taste. They're about dignity. They remind prisoners that they can still make choices, still create, still find moments of joy in a place designed to strip those things away. For an hour, sitting on the floor with friends, eating nachos made from chips and jalapenos, the prison walls fade just a little. But food in prison is also about power. Stronger inmates and gangs often control who gets commissary and who doesn't. They tax spreads, demand portions, or use food as a weapon. Refusing to pay can mean punishment, beatings, or worse. In some prisons, ramen debt has sparked fights, stabbings, even riots. And yet, the spread culture survives. Because in a place where the chow hall serves little more than scraps, inmates find a way to reclaim their humanity. A packet of ramen, a crushed bag of chips, and a little creativity can mean the difference between despair and survival. One former inmate summed it up best: prison food will break you down. But the spreads? That's where we got our soul back. That's where we remembered we were still people. Rotten reality. If you think prison food is just bad tasting, think again. The real horror lies in the fact that sometimes it's not even safe to eat. Across America, prisons have been plagued by food so spoiled, so contaminated, that it has sparked riots, lawsuits, and nationwide scandals. In Michigan, inmates were served meat stamped with the words, "not fit for human consumption." This wasn't rumor, it was fact, exposed in a 2014 investigation into the prison food contractor Aramark. In the same year, inspectors found maggots crawling in a food service area at another Michigan prison. Prisoners reported being handed trays with foul-smelling meat, slimy vegetables, and bread so moldy it was blue-green in color. Ohio had its own maggot scandal. Inmates at multiple prisons reported insects in their food lines. One man described biting into his meal and realizing something was moving in it. When he complained, a guard shrugged and said, "Protein's protein." Florida prisoners went public with photos of mold-infested loaves of bread being served daily. Entire blocks of inmates grew sick with diarrhea and vomiting, and still, guards told them to eat or don't eat. In Texas, things weren't any better. Prisoners claimed they were fed rancid meat and potatoes that tasted of chemicals. Some said they had no choice but to scrape off mold and eat what was left. In one infamous lawsuit, inmates alleged they were given slop so unidentifiable, dogs at nearby shelters were being fed better meals. And these aren't isolated cases. Across the country, outbreaks of food poisoning sweep through prisons like wildfire. In one southern facility, dozens of inmates fell violently ill after eating spoiled chicken. Guards scrambled to hand out buckets for vomiting, but no real medical help arrived. Prisoners lay on their bunks, dehydrated and shaking, for days. When inmates try to speak up, the system crushes them. Filing grievances rarely changes anything. More often, it brings retaliation. Guards might randomly search your cell, confiscate your commissary, or throw you in solitary confinement. Complaining about food becomes a dangerous game, one that most prisoners eventually give up on. The cruel reality is this: if you're behind bars, you have no choice. You can't walk out of the chow hall. You can't go to a store. You can't refuse the meal and order takeout. It's eat what's given to you, or starve. One ex-inmate recalled, "They gave me bologna that was turning green. I told the officer and he laughed. He said, 'Then don't eat it.' I was starving, so I ate around the green parts. I was sick for 3 days straight." Think about that. In a country that spends billions on its prison system, human beings are being forced to eat food that would be thrown away anywhere else. Food that would shut down a restaurant, close a school cafeteria, or spark outrage in a hospital. Behind prison walls, it's just another day. And it's not just the stomach that suffers. The psychological toll is heavy. Imagine the humiliation of being treated like garbage, of knowing your body isn't even worth safe food. Over time, that wears you down. Hunger and sickness blend with hopelessness. Meals stop being nourishment and become punishment. This is the rotten reality of prison food. A system where contamination is covered up, where lawsuits drag on for years, and where inmates learn that their health, and sometimes their lives, are worth less than the budget savings of a corrupt contract. Health consequences. The damage caused by prison food doesn't always happen in a single meal. It builds slowly, day after day, tray after tray, until the body begins to break down. Prisoners don't just serve time. Their health does too. The first problem is malnutrition. With meals built on cheap starches like bread, rice, and potatoes, inmates often lack the vitamins and protein that keep the body strong. Many report losing shocking amounts of weight in just months. Their skin becomes pale and dull. Their hair thins. Nails become brittle. Weakness sets in. A once healthy body begins to look worn, hollow, and starved. For others, the opposite happens. Because meals are high in sugar and simple carbs, prisoners gain unhealthy weight. White bread, syrupy drinks, and processed starches flood the body with empty calories. Without exercise or proper nutrition, inmates develop obesity, clogged arteries, and failing hearts. Then there are the diseases that spread silently behind bars. Diabetes is one of the most common. With diets overloaded in sugar and cheap carbohydrates, blood sugar levels spike. Inmates who never had health issues before incarceration suddenly find themselves dependent on insulin. High blood pressure and cholesterol rise too, fueled by salt-packed, greasy meals. By the time many prisoners leave, they carry lifelong illnesses. The prison food system has permanently changed their bodies. Dental health collapses as well. With so much sugar and so little access to proper dental care, teeth rot away. Ex-inmates often describe losing multiple teeth during their sentence, sometimes pulling them out themselves when the pain became unbearable. But the damage isn't just physical. Food has a powerful impact on the mind, and inside prison, bad diets feed mental illness. Scientists have shown that deficiencies in vitamins like B12 and omega-3s worsen depression and anxiety. Add to that the lack of fresh fruit and vegetables, and it becomes a recipe for despair. One former prisoner said, "I didn't notice at first. But after a year, I was always tired, always angry, always down. I thought it was just prison itself. Later I realized it was the food. My brain was starving." Hunger also fuels aggression. When inmates leave the chow hall still starving, tempers flare. Fights break out over stolen bread or traded snacks. Some of the bloodiest brawls inside prison walls begin not with drugs or debts, but with food. And then there's Nutraloaf. Officially, it's called a disciplinary diet. In reality, it's punishment disguised as nutrition. Imagine a brick made of mashed beans, leftover vegetables, flour, and grease, baked into a dense, tasteless block. It has the calories of a meal but none of the dignity of food. Inmates forced to eat it for days at a time describe gagging, vomiting, and even refusing to eat altogether. Courts in several states have ruled Nutraloaf unconstitutional, but in others it remains a tool of control. Guards use it to break down defiant inmates, knowing that even the strongest man can't fight hunger forever. One prisoner put it bluntly, "After 3 days of Nutraloaf, you'd confess to anything just to get real food again." The toll of prison food is slow, cruel, and invisible to most. By the time inmates are released, many carry permanent scars, not just the memories of violence and confinement, but the diseases, broken teeth, and weakened bodies caused by years of neglect disguised as meals. Prison is supposed to be about justice. But when the food itself destroys health, the sentence becomes something else entirely. It becomes a slow, grinding form of punishment that doesn't end when the bars open. It follows you for life. Corruption exposed. If you want to understand why prison food is so bad, you have to follow the money. Behind every tray of watery beans and moldy bread, there's a contract, and those contracts are worth billions. Decades ago, many prisons cooked their own meals, using state staff and local suppliers. But in the last 30 years, states have increasingly turned to private contractors. These companies promise savings by streamlining operations. In reality, savings come from cutting corners on food quality, staff pay, and safety standards. The biggest names are companies like Aramark Correctional Services and Trinity Services Group. Together, they feed hundreds of thousands of inmates across America every day. On paper, they guarantee balanced, nutritious meals. But in practice, scandal follows wherever they go. In Michigan, Aramark was fined after inspectors discovered maggots in kitchen areas, rotten meat being served, and workers smuggling contraband into prisons. In Florida, Trinity was accused of serving moldy bread and spoiled vegetables. In Kentucky, Aramark was caught shorting portion sizes, leaving inmates with less than half the food they were supposed to receive. And it's not just about bad food. Former employees have blown the whistle on corruption inside these companies. Some were told to deliberately water down soups and sauces to make them stretch further. Others admitted to mixing expired food with fresh deliveries so nothing was wasted or reported. Because the less they spend, the more they keep. A contractor may receive $2.50 per inmate per day from the state. If they can feed that inmate for $1.50, the extra dollar is pure profit. Multiply that by 100,000 inmates, 3 meals a day, 365 days a year, and you're looking at tens of millions in profit. And the inmates? They're not customers. They can't complain, they can't walk away, they can't boycott. They're captive, literally. Even state officials sometimes get caught in the game. Investigations have revealed prison administrators diverting food budgets to other areas, staff bonuses, new equipment, even private luxuries. Meanwhile, the people eating the meals grow sicker and weaker. The corruption goes beyond budgets. In some prisons, guards steal food supplies for themselves. Boxes of fresh fruit vanish from kitchens before inmates ever see them. Meat is siphoned off for private cookouts. Even commissary goods, purchased by inmates with their own money, sometimes disappear before reaching the shelves. The system is designed to dehumanize. To private contractors, prisoners are not people. They're numbers on a balance sheet. Each tray is not a meal, but a calculation. How cheaply can we feed them without sparking a riot? And when riots do happen, when hunger finally drives men past their breaking point, officials rarely admit the truth. They blame discipline problems, never the food that sparked the rage. But ex-inmates tell a different story. Half the fights I saw in prison were over food. Either the lack of it, the quality of it, or the gangs controlling it. Corruption ensures the cycle continues. Companies lobby states to renew their contracts. Politicians, eager to save money on paper, agree. Meanwhile, year after year, trays filled with garbage keep being handed out to men and women whose voices the world doesn't want to hear. The tragedy is simple. The system could change. Budgets could allow fresh food. Local farms could supply prisons. Kitchens could be cleaned and monitored properly. But as long as profit is more important than people, the corruption will remain. Behind every rotten loaf of bread and every maggot-infested tray is not just negligence, it's a business decision. A decision that values dollars over dignity. Food is the most basic of human needs. We don't think twice about it on the outside. We wake up, pour cereal, stop at a cafe, grab lunch, cook dinner. We argue about diets, flavors, calories. But behind prison walls, food means something very different. It is punishment. It is humiliation. It is control. From moldy bread to maggot-infested meat, from watered-down beans to the dreaded Nutraloaf brick, prison meals are not designed to heal or nourish. They are designed to keep inmates barely alive, just enough to wake up tomorrow and repeat the cycle. And yet, food inside is more than punishment. It's power. It decides who gets respect, who owes debt, who controls the block. Gangs tax it. Guards manipulate it. Contractors profit from it. Something as small as a packet of ramen becomes worth more than cash, worth fighting, even killing. But in the shadows of this brutal system, food also becomes resistance. The spreads, the jailhouse burritos, the prison pizzas, the makeshift tamales, they are more than meals. They are survival. They are dignity. They are proof that even when stripped of everything, people still find ways to create, to share, to remember what it feels like to be human. And that's the cruel paradox. Food is supposed to be the great equalizer. Rich or poor, free or locked away, it is the most basic right we all share. But when you see what prisoners are fed, when you hear the stories of sickness, starvation, and corruption, you realize that inside the justice system, even that right can be taken away. So what does it say about us? About a society that claims to value justice, but starves the very people it locks up? About a system where billions are spent on cages, but pennies on the plates of the human beings inside them? If food is the measure of humanity, then prison trays tell a damning story. A story of a nation willing to let people rot, not just behind bars, but from the inside out. One former prisoner put it in the simplest, most haunting words. In prison, the food wasn't just bad. It was the reminder that we weren't seen as people anymore. And maybe that's the final truth. Behind the cold steel doors and the buzzing fluorescent lights, behind every tray of watery beans and spoiled meat, prison food is more than a meal. It is a message. A message that says, you don't matter. The question we're left with is this. If a society is judged by how it treats its most vulnerable, what does it mean when even a meal, the most basic human right, becomes another weapon of punishment?